Let's go to God in prayer. Oh Lord, we thank you for this day that we've come into your presence. You are always here. You're always available. And so we're grateful that we can come before your presence at any time. You're quoted as saying in the book of Hebrews, let us come boldly before the throne of grace, that we might find help and attain mercy in the time of need. So now we come asking you to bless us. Bless us through this broadcast that others may come to know you. Thank you as we share these stories about the history of our race. Now we give you praise and glory for all that you are doing and all that you have done. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Pastor Victor Gooden here. I'm with Deacon Charles Bryant of our ministry here at New Life. We're going to talk about some Black history facts, how it was when he was growing up. Our oral traditions have not been kept like we should have kept them. To tell the stories and to be sure that we leave a legacy of things behind for those who will come behind us. So Deacon Bryant, here we are, and tell us about where did you grow up? You're not from Daytona.
No, I'm not from Daytona, Pastor. I grew up in a small town outside of Jacksonville. The name of the town is Baldwin. It's a part of Jacksonville now. It's been incorporated into Jacksonville city limits. It's about 18 miles west on I-10. If you're going west on I-10, I grew up on a street called Moore Street.
Okay.
Moore Street in Baldwin. It amazes me and my sister because as we look back over, my grandmother, when she passed, she was 94 years old. And she somehow managed to get at least 5 properties on that one street. And we never know how she, amassed the money or come about being able to purchase the property, but she was able to give each one of her kids, she had 3 kids that we're aware of, my uncle, my mom, and my aunt. Each one was given a property to build their own house on. And she had her own house, which we still have today. We have my mom's house, my grandmother's house, and my aunt's house. And then I have another aunt who is in a nursing home in St. Augustine. She's 94 years old. She still owns, actually she owns 2 houses on that street. So it amazes us how she was able to accomplish that, but she did have, she owned that property. And one of the properties that was across from my mother's house, which I grew up in, we used that for farmland. Back in the day, we had a guy that lived in the neighborhood. He had a mule.
Okay.
So I can remember him as a kid coming down with that mule and plowing up that lot over there that we had. And that's where we grew vegetables, all kind of vegetables. My mother taught us how to can okra, cucumbers.
Now, when you say can, the younger folk might think you mean a tin can, putting the can. But explain, because I grew up with the canning, and it was not a tin can.
No, it was not a tin can. It was actually a jar, like a mason jar that you would put them in, and you would. It was amazing how we could take the cucumbers and you put them in there, and you put vinegar and stuff in them, and within a couple of months or so, then it turns into pickles. And that's how a lot of, we got pickles and everything. But it was amazing how we were able to plant peas, okra, squash, tomatoes. We had everything in there. We had, and right across the street. So whenever we wanted something, Mom would tell me to go across the street and pick pick some peas or cut some okra and bring it back, and that's what we cooked. And you know, it was organic food that we were eating, fresh out of the garden.
Well, we got organic food, not in the health food store and whatever, but it's so expensive.
Yeah.
So expensive.
Yeah.
Now, what did your mama cook on?
She in the day she had a electric stove, because I, you know, growing up, it was in the 50s, and we had electric stove, but we didn't have electric heaters. We had this is the heater that I had in my bedroom growing up as a boy.
Now, this is, for those of you who do not know, this is the smaller version of a wood-burning stove.
Right.
And we were talking to Deacon Rodney Allen, who is running the camera for us now, about wood-burning stoves, and he shared something about it. Now, this is the regular version, what, about 4 times this size?
Yes.
At least. And my mama shared something with me on the way up. She said she wondered why her mother always would cook one thing at a time. Say she thought about it and said because there was one eye on that stove, and so you would cook on that one eye. Now, did anybody in y'all's community have a wooden stove?
Yes, yes. Everybody in the neighborhood, they had one of these, or they had a wooden stove. I could remember many times that my uncle and our family traveled to where we call Lumber City, Georgia, which is just over the state line as you're going west. Okay. And we had family members that owned a lot of property. They did a lot of farm work and everything. And we used to go up there. And my sister and I, we hated going because this place, it was known for gnats and flies, and for you know, every time we went there, the gnats looked like they met us. And we had what was real back then called peak eye, because those gnats started flying around your eyes and getting in your eyes, your eyes turned red. That was what we really had, was peak eye. So a lot of times my sister and I, when we got there, we carried sandwiches with us, and we sat out there in the car and eat with the windows up. But it was hot, it was in the summer, but we couldn't take the gnats, we couldn't take the flies. So we stay out there in the car and eat, because the houses back then, Pastor, they had wooden plywood up to the windows. They didn't have any glass windows.
No screens?
No screens. You open up that wooden window, and my sister and I said, what about air conditioning? They said, you got air on condition that you open up the wooden windows. That was your air conditioning. And so, but I mean, we went every summer, 2 or 3 times every summer we end up going up to Lumber City, Georgia. And I promised myself when I got old enough to say I wasn't going back, I haven't been back. And I know I've seen the pictures. My sister's been back there, my aunt, and they showed them pictures. We got relatives that got these big farm tractors. They still own a bunch of land and property up in that area where they still farming.
Question for you. With the wood stove and those things, did you feel like that you all were, what's the word for it? Some black folks said they didn't know they were poor until they went to school, and compared to other folks, then they found out they were poor. But you all had everything you needed, right?
Yes. We didn't feel that we were poor, but because everybody in the neighborhood was in the same position that we were in. So we played right there. We did everything in the community right there in our area. The school that we attended, we lived right in front of the railroad track. So every night, the train come by, and it was like intersection or where a lot of trains came through, because in Baldwin they have Seaboard Coastline Railroad, and they had another railroad company that was there. My father worked for the Seaboard Coastline, and no, my uncle worked for the Seaboard Coastline, and my father worked for the Frigidaire Freight Company that was also there in Baldwin. One thing I would like for the kids, if they're looking at this video, to understand that growing up with as a young boy in a city like Baldwin outside of Jacksonville, a lot of people say, you can't grow up in a household without having a man. I grew up in a household without having a man, but not because of my father's fault. My father passed when I was 9 years old. And I can remember to this day the things that he taught me. As a kid, he took me fishing. I remember my dad liked sharp cars. He always kept him a good looking car, kept it waxed and clean. I guess that rubbed off on me. And he had a boat. He'd go fishing. I can remember him taking me fishing, and I'm sitting in his lap, and I'm guiding, I'm driving, and he messing the gas and the brakes. And I have good memories of my dad. Although he died, he was only 48 years old when he passed. He had went into a diabetic coma, and he didn't come out of it. But I still have those memories, and I remember the night before he passed away. Back then, in those days, kids were not allowed to go in the hospitals. You had to be at least 12 years old to get in the hospital. Well, I was only 9, so they wouldn't let me in the hospital. But my older brother, he was probably 17, 18 years old at the time. He told me, your dad's not going to pass without you getting a chance to see him. So he snuck me in the hospital. He told me, go around in the back, hide in the bushes, and I'll come get you. And being a big brother, I did what he told me to do. He got me in a lot of trouble, got a lot of beatings, but because of him. But he was big brother, I looked up to him, so he was able to get me in. I saw my dad that night. He passed like 3 o'clock the next morning, but at least I was able to just talk to him and see him before he actually passed away.
How did you all handle from wooden stoves to electric stoves? How did you all handle the black-white relationships? Because you shared with me that your school was small, so you all didn't have 11 men on the football field. You had, I think, over 6 men.
Yeah. Well, that was when I moved from Baldwin down to Pearson. But let me just reflect just a minute back on the school in Baldwin.
Okay.
The school in Baldwin that we had, it was what we call, I don't know if you remember, Pastor, old section houses that we call them.
Yeah, I do remember.
They set way up off the ground. Mm-hmm. Well, our school, black school, it was segregated downside the railroad track. The kids had to walk downside the railroad track to get to the school. When you got there, it was this section, the old section house that was sitting way up off the ground, and it was sitting next to one of those power stations. So I always thought they was trying to execute us anyway, because I'm like, when it rained and stuff, we right there by the power thing, and I'm like, they're trying to kill us already and put us downside the railroad track and all of that. But I moved from Baldwin to Pearson to live with my aunt, Laura Logan. That was my aunt. And I moved from Baldwin to Pearson when I was in 10th grade, because Baldwin, I couldn't take Baldwin because of the prejudice stuff that were going on. My sister actually was one of the first students that integrated the high school in Baldwin.
Okay.
Because back then we were segregated. up until her junior year, I think it was, the students in Baldwin, you go all the way up to ninth grade. Then the next year you have to be bused from Baldwin, and we all went to New Stanton High School in Jacksonville. And I dreaded going to Jacksonville because I was small back then, and everybody picked on me. I got in a lot of fights, and I got a lot of beats by their parents because I always believed in the element of surprise, and I always had me a stick here somewhere. And when they come after me, I put that stick on them, and then their mom was gonna beat me, and then my mom would beat me. So
that was a different day, though.
Yeah.
We can't touch a child.
No, you can't. But back then, you got into a fight, you're gonna get a beat before you got home, and then when you get home, you're gonna get another beating. So I just decided I wasn't gonna take 3 beatings. So I gave out 1 and got 2. So, but anyway, when I moved to Pearson, I had been in the area for back and forth, coming back and forth down during the summer to work. My aunt let me come down and work. And
now, what kind of work were you doing?
Well, we were doing first. We was pulling weeds out of ferneries.
Now explain that, because a lot of folk don't know about the ferneries.
Okay, a fern is a leafy decoration that you see when you look at roses or you look at flowers. The background decoration,
The ferns.
they are grown. A lot of that is grown out in Pearson. I mean, a lot of it. And so we used to pull the weeds from around the fern and chase out the rattlesnakes. And how
old were you then?
I started work at 9 years old.
So you out there in the fernery pulling weeds as a young kid?
Yes. And my sister, she was 11, so she was right there with us. And we would start to work. The lady would pick us up at 6:30 in the morning. She had her own truck or van. She would pick us up, and 7 o'clock, you're gonna start working. And you work from 7 till noon. You get an hour for lunch, and 1 o'clock, you start back work. You work from 1 to 5. It wouldn't mean that you're gonna get back home at 5. That means you're gonna leave the fern field at 5. All that for $10 a day. And so I decided that I needed to learn how to cut fern because I didn't want to stay out there all day for $10. So I left my sister out there pulling weeds. I learned how to cut fern, where I could make $20 a day if I cut. I learned how to cut fast because when you're dealing with cutting fern, you only get paid for what you do. If you go out there and sit down and don't do nothing, you don't get paid. So I learned how to cut fern, and I actually one of the students that I went to high school with, his dad gave him some land, which a lot of them do, and he had his own fern. So we were classmates, but I worked for him after school, cutting fern. And I wanted to play basketball. And so my aunt said, I got me a car. She let me get a car, and I had car payments. And she said, you want this car, so you're gonna have to, when school out, you're gonna have to go to work and cut fern, and then you're gonna come back and practice basketball. We'll see how bad you want to play. And so I did. I really wanted to play. And so I came back and I played basketball 2 years at Taylor High School in Pearson. At one point, it became to be prejudice because one of the guys that wanted to play, he couldn't play as well as I could, but one of his friends was going to stage a fight with me so I could get suspended and his friend could play. But one of my friends found out where this player was, and he jumped on him before he got to me. So I was safe, But it was small school.
Was it prejudice?
It was prejudice, but not as bad as Baldwin.
Okay.
Baldwin had a lot of instructors from Mississippi, Alabama, And I had one guy tell me my sister was in his class. He liked my sister. She made all A's. And I went to his class and he told me, you're not your sister. You're not going to pass my class. I told him, yes, I am. And I passed his class. And the next year, I went and signed up for the class the next year. And when I got there, he said, I see you back here again. I said, I made it last year. I'm going to make it this year. Well, the second time I went to his class, I had my transfer papers. I was moving from Baldwin down to Pearson. So, but it was, Pearson, it was small. I had 27 classmates in my class.
In your
senior class.
In the 27?
27.
Now that was a small class.
Yeah, it was seven blacks and 20 white students.
That's a small class.
You know, and but I was sharp dresser back then, Pastor. I was the best dresser for my class. My class, because I worked and bought my own clothes. My aunt let me buy my own clothes and everything. But our football team, we didn't have enough players to play.
Not with 27 in your class.
We didn't have enough players to play the 11-man football, so we had 6-man football. So whoever played us, they had to play 6-man. And we were champs with that because everybody couldn't play 6-man football, and our team was used to playing it. You know, of course, my aunt wouldn't let me play because she said I was too little. But I had been playing with my brother in Baldwin, and they pushed me down on the pavement, skinned me all up and everything. But I could have took it, but she wouldn't sign the paper, so I just played basketball. And so my senior year, I wanted to go to school and go to college. And I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go. When I looked at VCU, I'm like, I can't afford that. You know, I need to figure out how I could go to school. And so my sister was already in college. She was at FAMU. And so I know it was going to be tough on my mom for both of us to be in college, you know, and my father had passed away, and the only income we had was from the VA and railroad retirement, what he had left, because she wasn't working. And so I enrolled in FAMU the first year. I had to pay my own tuition, which, if you look at it now, it was really a joke, because we were on a quarter system. It was $190 a quarter.
Yeah, that is a joke. You can't get an hour for that now.
And it meant that, you know, and you could take as many hours as you wanted to. And so my first year, of course, I couldn't live on campus because I had a car. They wouldn't allow freshmen to live on campus with a car. So I lived down the street in a boarding house with guys, and most of them was from Fernandina Beach, Jacksonville, Callahan, in that area. And so it was 7 of us that lived in the boarding house down the street. So it worked out good for me because I didn't have to drive back and forth every day to school. And so I could walk to school and still keep my car. And I didn't have to worry too much. I never ate in the cafeteria because my sister, she lived in an honor house for girls, and she was a home economics major. So all I had to do is take her and her roommate to the grocery store, and they fed me all the time. So that helped me. And I still had my car. I would come home every other weekend, unless they had football season, and I would come home and I'd call my aunt and say, I need a job. I'm coming home, I'll be home Friday night. I need to work Saturday and Sunday morning so I can make my car payment. And I did that until the end of my freshman year. I applied for ROTC scholarship. And I really didn't think I was gonna get it. I had a good GPA, but there was 2 other guys from Lake City. They were nerds, but they were real smart. And today, if they still living, they became doctors. And they were always competing against each other. And I said, well, I'm gonna put in for it. They can only say yes or no. And when we went for the interview, they choked up, and I didn't, because I felt I didn't have anything to lose. I'm competing against guys that I can't compete against them with the grades, because they real smart. And so I went in the interview, and I came out, and they called me back in. And they told me I had a scholarship before these two guys, because they were scared, And when they called me back in, they said, okay, you got a scholarship. Raise your right hand. I said, for what? They said, you get sworn in the Army. And, I said, well, I got to think about this. So they said, go out and come back when you're ready. So I went outside, and I thought about it. I said, Vietnam is going on. And I had a high draft number. Back then, they were drafting people into the military. And I said, I got a high draft number. I gotta do something to keep from them drafting me. And so I went back in. I got sworn in. I had a 3-year ROTC scholarship. They paid books, tuition. They paid travel when I go back home for the summer. And when I come back, they would pay for it. And I had a real good administrator in the ROTC department, a lady from Quincy, Florida. She took to me, and she kind of made me like I was her son, looked out for me, and made sure I got everything I was supposed to get and then some.
Let me ask you a question. The relationships then were different than they are now, because we couldn't go to certain hotels.
Right.
And they had to go in the back of restaurants, backdoor restaurants, and all of that. And as I keep looking at this wood stove, it's a reminder of past. Keeps reminding me of where we were. How did you deal? Because the military then was very prejudiced.
Yeah.
So when you got into the military, how did you deal with the prejudice part?
Well, I'm gonna go back just a minute, Pastor, because you mentioned restaurants. In Baldwin, where I grew up, they had this one restaurant in the center of town. It was called Everybody Lunch. Everybody could go there except us.
Okay.
But my mom and my aunt worked in the restaurant, so we had it better than what they did, because they was in the back cooking, and when we get out of school, we come by there, we was eating better than they were, and we didn't have to pay. But the thing of it, when I went into the military, I went in there with the mindset that I'm going to do at least 20 years. That was my mindset.
So
I was going to retire.
Be a lifer.
Yeah, I went. As a matter of fact, my obligation with the military only had me as I had a 6-year obligation. I had to do 4 years active duty, 2 years inactive reserve. My first year, I decided I wanted to stay to 20, so I contacted the Department of Defense and told them I wanted to go indefinite. They approved for me to be indefinite, meaning I could choose when I wanted to get out, I could stay on in. And after the first year, the end of the first year, I went through the training, tank training at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And they had a lot of white NCOs, non-commissioned officers, who were doing the training. And they did everything they could do to try to fail us as we were going through the course.
So you talking about black tank drivers, or
right.
black tank operators, I should say.
Yes. I was what you call a tank commander.
Okay.
On the tank, I would be setting up on the top. I was commander, and I had 5 other tanks in that what you call a platoon. You had a platoon of tanks, and you had about 30 men that actually worked for you. But during the training, we had to go through that, and I had white officers white non-commissioned officers. I was a commissioned officer, meaning the non-commissioned officer had to show respect for us. Wherever they saw us, they had to salute us. I had white non-commissioned officers that would walk blocks to keep from saluting us.
Are you serious?
Yes. They would try to fail us, when we went through the courses and things. They gave us a hard time at Fort Knox, but I was able to pass that. And then my next duty station was Fort Polk, Louisiana. And I was initially supposed to go to Germany, but I didn't want to go to Germany. I don't like cold weather. I was going to be on the Russian border, and I didn't want that. And there was a guy, another lieutenant there, who didn't want to go to Fort Polk, and we were able to switch orders. Well, my first day at Fort Polk, I had orders to go. I was supposed to be on the rifle range. I was supposed to be a safety officer on the rifle range. Well, I had an appointment with the colonel on a Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Well, I got there early because I always wanted, make sure I'm on time. And I got there 9 o'clock in the morning, and the colonel came out and told me to go to lunch.
And you had just arrived?
Yes, 9 o'clock in the morning. I just got on post last Friday. And Monday morning, I was told to go to lunch. I went to lunch. I came back. When I got back at 1 o'clock, he had changed me from his unit and sent me to a different unit because he wanted somebody white. He wanted a white lieutenant.
Those things are still going on now. I can't say how I know, but I do know that we're still being overlooked in the military, even though a lot of things in the military we do better than other folks.
Oh yeah.
But we're still being overlooked with that. And when I look back, it takes me back to the days of when we thought we had nothing. We really had a whole lot.
Oh yes. Yes.
I want to switch the subject a minute. Let's get this saw here. Deacon Allen, are we still on? If I stand up, am I still on the camera?
Yeah.
All right. This saw right here. We want to show this saw off. This saw right here, 2-man saw.
Called a cross saw.
Yeah. And you would lay it against a tree, and you pull. You go back and forth like that. You got us on there? Back and forth. All right, let's back up a little bit, D. How about right here? Perfect. You go back and forth with this saw to cut the tree. As you can see, the handle's off. This is an old saw. I remember these kind of saws, and there may have been other saws, but this was all we had to use. Now, did you do many cuts with a saw like this?
No, I usually did all of the cutting wood with an axe.
Now, we had an axe. We should have brought us an axe.
Yeah, I had an axe. And that was part of my chores too, was make sure that axe was sharpened.
Yes,
I had
sir.
a file, and I had to make sure, because when I hit it, I wanted to break. I didn't want to have to keep chopping. I wanted to break. So I kept the axe sharp, and I kept it in my room. It was funny because this little heater was in a room about this size, and I had wood piled up that I had cut because it was too cold.
Inside your room?
In the room.
Okay.
And I had it piled up, and I would get up every morning about 6 o'clock, and I would fire up the heater and heat up the house for everybody. Because the way our house was built, they had to come through my room to get to the bathroom. Because for years, we didn't have a bathroom in the house. We had an outside bathroom. But when we got the bathroom, they had to come through my room to get to the bathroom. And I had this baby fired up.
Well, I ladies, y'all can identify with these. Madam C.J. Walker,
Yes, sir.
who was the one, the inventor, straightening comb, or the hot comb, and put them on these stoves to get them hot, to use them. My mama shared with me that in the wooden stove that they had during the day, that sometimes it was raining, they couldn't hang out clothes, hanging the clothes up above the wooden stove so that the stove would dry the clothes. And when my grandmother couldn't get outside, she'd have to wash the clothes by hand and hang them up. they had one of those washing machines with the three wheels.
Ringers.
Yeah, and that's what you had to be careful. If you got your finger caught up in that thing, it take your whole hand up in there.
Yeah, yeah.
And so a lot of things, I guess, I didn't realize that we didn't have because it was always sufficient.
Yeah.
And we had outside bathroom. I wish you had brought them a slop jar
Yeah.
because some of them don't know about a slop jar
Yeah.
and what these things were used for. And our folk had to do this even when there was indoor plumbing in other folks' houses.
Right.
And I remember the church we attended and where the outdoor bathrooms were. And that's unheard of now as we go through this. And it was because of one word, privilege.
Right.
It was with, and I'm not messing with nobody now because I have white friends, we have white members, and I know none of them are like this. So I'm not talking to my friends and the members of New Life that are white. I'm talking about white people that were evil.
Yes.
And we still have some evil today and got one there in Tallahassee. But anyway, they had the privilege, so we got the leftovers.
Right. Right. But our families, parents and family knew how to use the leftovers, and we didn't even know it was leftovers.
No.
Because, you know, in my house, we had chickens. We had chickens. We had eggs.
Outside in the yard.
Outside the yard, and we had to build a chicken coop with chicken wire because the chicken hawks would come in at night and they eat the babies, and so we had to protect them. But we had. I remember I was another one of my chores was collect eggs. So
You said chore. Somebody did. That's an ancient word. That's a foreign term now.
Yeah.
You speak it in tongues.
Oh, no, you had.
For the children now.
Yeah.
Anybody know about no chore now?
Yeah, that meant that you was assigned certain things that you had to do, and you had to do them before you could go to bed.
Or else.
Yeah, yeah. But I had to get the eggs, gather the eggs, and when the chickens, when they decided they wasn't going to lay eggs anymore, they became a meal. You know, we had to take them out in the backyard, wring the necks, get the hot water and pick them, and then, you know, you eat them, you know. And the same thing, we had hogs, and we kill the hogs. We had what we call a lot of people call a wash pot. I call it a smut pot because it always had smut around it. Because when we burned
big black pot.
But that pot was used for so many different things. We would use it for, my mom and them would use it when they wanted to boil water for, you know, to wash the clothes. We would use it when we kill a hog, and they would use it for grease. They make grease back then, and oil. They ain't buy it out the store. They make it. When they kill a hog or something, the fat, they would heat it up, and they make oil, and they made soap. You know, they
lye soap.
Yeah, made that lye soap, and it was a lot of things that they were able to do, and they taught us how to do stuff. You know, you had to learn how to do something. You didn't sit around and play video games and watch TV back then, because I remember my grandmother was the first one I ever knew that had a remote control TV.
Back in the day?
Back in the day, she had a black and white remote control TV. So I spent most of my time down at her house when I was real small, because I mashed that button, and that was a thrill for me. You know, back in the day, there wasn't a lot of people had them. And you know, and we joke about the antennas and stuff. Back in the day, that aluminum foil did some tricks.
on those rabbit ears.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. What was the most, I guess you would call it, frightening time dealing with racism and prejudice that you had in the military? Because the military, you would encounter a whole lot more. Was there ever a time when you feared for your life, not from enemy soldiers, but from within the system?
Well, being in Louisiana, it was tough because the area where we were, the surrounding areas were very prejudiced, and at times we had a gun range that was outside of the post, and they were actually shooting at the soldiers. They didn't care whether you were black or white or whatever. They didn't like the military. As a matter of fact, when we would go through the city on the way to the gun range, we couldn't even stop in the towns to use the restroom because they still had the black, colored and white restrooms, and you weren't allowed to use them. And I can remember one time they started shooting, and I told my troops we was on tanks, turn that gun tube and point towards their house, and let one loose if they keep shooting. And so they stopped shooting after that gun tube started pointing towards their house.
It changed their mind.
Yeah.
And
But that was one of the most scary times that I had in the military. I mean, I had other prejudice with young soldiers. I had
White soldiers?
White soldiers. I had a soldier convince me that went and told my colonel that I had spent the weekend with his wife.
With the colonel's wife?
No, with the private's wife.
Okay.
And he was mad with me because I gave him an order.
Okay, now what was your rank at that time? Were
I
you
was
captain?
a first lieutenant.
Okay.
I was first lieutenant, and I gave him an order, and he didn't want to do it. So you get in the army, you don't get asked, you get told, and he didn't follow instructions, and he couldn't go off post to see his wife. And that particular weekend, it was a 3-day weekend, and I was going with some friends of mine to New Orleans. So I wasn't even in town, I wasn't on post. And while I was gone, his wife went to the provost marshal office on post and told him that I had spent the weekend with him. And when I got back that Monday, I got called up to the colonel's office, and he said, well, Lieutenant, Private so-and-so has 12 of his fellow privates saying that you spent the weekend with his wife. And I said, well, I have 4 commissioned officers and one of them aren't to verify that I was in New Orleans. I stayed at her house with them. And so the colonel called him back in and said, Lieutenant Bryant has 5 witnesses, including a civilian, that can verify that he wasn't even in town during that time. You want to change your story, or you want to go with it? Because I'm going to call the other witnesses that you have in and get them to testify. And he backed off. And so I had given him an Article 15, which meant I could take $75 a month from his pay for 3 months and restrict him. But when the colonel got through with him, he was missing a lot more money, and his wife wasn't able to come on post anymore.
Now this was a white colonel?
Yes.
Now, that's kind of unusual that a white colonel would be fair like that.
Yeah.
And but this guy was fair with you.
Oh yeah. I enjoyed. He was one of the few colonels that I really liked working for, because I was doing basic training. I was teaching basic training at the time. For the first 2 years I was in the military, I taught basic training, and then I switched over to tanks.
Now, you know what, something I keep saying, and some of our folk think I'm soft when I say this, but there were a whole lot of whites, and there are a whole lot of whites and other races, even now, that know this prejudice thing, this racism thing is wrong. They know it's wrong, and they'll stand with you. And this is just one example of where this colonel stood with you when he didn't have to.
Right.
Because he could have accepted the other guy's story.
Yes.
And that would have been the end of your military career.
Right. And I would have had to go at least, defend myself. And he stopped it right there because I had worked for him, and he knew my character, he knew my work ethic, and matter of fact, he was laughing. He said, I know you didn't do this, but I got to go through this process to prove that you did. And I understood that, and I appreciated what he did. Because I had some commanders that didn't. I had one that gave me an evaluation in the first 6 months that I was on his command, and you're not supposed to get a review until at least a year. And but I got from under him real fast because I knew what was next. They was messing with a lot of guys, and I saw, and I hope kids learn from some of the things that they could see, because I saw a white lieutenant. They messed up his career. He ended up in
a white lieutenant.
Yeah, he ended up in the stockade, and I said, I learned from that. I said, if they do that to him, what would they do to me?
And you know what, telling your story, it's an humble experience, because all of this made your upbringing, the chores, the work ethics, and all of this. If you had to give some advice to youth now coming up, what would you say to them, Black youth?
Well, you got to, number one, prepare yourself for what you want to do in the future. You can't wait until the last minute to decide what you want to do with your life. That was one of the things that I learned coming from a small place, that, I had to compete with people that come from bigger cities that, they had a lot of different life experiences that I didn't have, but I try to prepare myself so whenever things come forward, I would be prepared for it. I learned from a lot of mistakes that I made. I questioned people. I took their advice. One of the things I was taught, my mom and my aunt always taught me, when I traveled in the military, they always say, connect to a church. Even when I was in college, I would connect with a church, because they said, well, if something happened to you, church people are going to contact us, the family, and let them know what's going on with you. They're going to keep you straight too. And I guess I love dealing with the mothers at church, because this is not something I just started doing. I've been doing this all my life, looking out for elderly females and dealing with them. Even the ones when I was in the military, the lady that we rented a trailer from, she was elderly. We stayed right next to her in the trailer. Every Sunday morning, she gonna make sure we up and going to church. She knew we were spotting, having a good time. She'd come over there, get up. I know y'all was up half the night because I heard you, but get up and go to church. And she made sure we did it. And when my mom and my aunt came out to meet her, she was right there. They go to church every Sunday.
Do you think, when we say church, the church piece is different now because we're not doing church with the virus and all, but church is different anyway from where we grew up, because people have a different expression of church. And most of our young folk, it's difficult. It's not really them, it's parents to get them in church. And I heard you talk about the way your aunt and your mother worked on you to make sure you all stayed in church.
Oh yeah.
And that's something beneficial. But from the wooden stove to electric stoves to all these things, and you worked for the city for a long time.
Yes.
And we've got a new city manager now.
Yeah.
You didn't work for him, and there were times I know you had to pull your hair dealing with the past administration. I want to ask you a whole lot about that in that past administration, but you still were able to do some things. And some things you got done, the senior prom, that was one I know.
Right.
And you've done the parades and different things for our city, and we appreciate everything that you've done with it. Is there anything else that you can think of that you would like to share before we close out the interview?
Well, other thing is I got my
cowboy.
This my cowboy. My uncle.
Hold it up so the audience can see it.
My uncle was his dad was a cowboy out of Martinville, Virginia. And believe it or not, my uncle was an entrepreneur, and my aunt was an entrepreneur. My aunt ran a nightclub for many years. That's helped send me to college. My uncle, he had his own pulpwood company that cut down trees, take them to the mill. He made a lot of money cutting down trees and taking them to the mill there in Pearson. And
what about that washboard you got?
oh yeah, I forgot that, the washboard.
That's a smaller version.
This is a small version here, but this is what we wash clothes on. And then it was used for that, but on Sunday it was used to make music.
Yeah, they go to singing and take something with it, and they just and make the noise with it. Yeah. You had some people that could really play these things. Think about this. The Africans and the use of steel drums. And each steel drum makes a different sound. Yeah. And with this, I remember seeing my grandmother use one of these rascals. I saw Deacon Charles doing this, showing us in the background here about the washboard. These are things, just think about this. The Lord brought us from this. And the Lord brought us from this. Although it might not be bad to have one of these rascals now with it, but the Lord brought us from all of this to where we are now.
Oh yeah.
That's just a blessing and a miracle. And you were sharing with the youth about being prepared, and not only being prepared, but setting some goals for yourself.
Yeah, you gotta set those goals and stand by them. You know, when I first got out of the military and came home, I was coming home to a position as a fireman. And when I got home, they decided, this was in DeLand, Florida, they decided they didn't need a black fireman. They needed a black police officer.
So you got moved.
They wouldn't give me the job as a black fireman, but they gave me a job as a black police officer. And it was funny because I went to Daytona State for the training. They never had before paid for anyone to go to that training. They paid for me to go. They gave me a vehicle to drive back and forth from the land over here to class, and they paid me. And that was something they hadn't did before, but they wanted a black officer. And so I at the time, I just got out of the military, and to be honest with you, I wanted to buy me a brand new Corvette. I needed a job to get it, so I could get that Corvette. And then I took the job, and I went down to the Chevrolet place and ordered me a brand new Corvette, and that I bought it. And but after less than a year, I wanted to move up. You know, and that's one thing I say to kids: don't be satisfied where you are. Always look for a better position. And I wanted to move up, and they didn't provide an opportunity for me to move up. So I decided, you know, this is not for me. And so I went down to the bank, to Barnett Bank, and I applied for a job. And they told me that I didn't qualify for the job because I didn't have any office experience. But yet they was hiring kids out of high school with no experience, no education.
That's why I was talking
about. I had a college degree, 4 years in the military, signed for $5 million worth of equipment, 275 men worked for me, and I had no office experience. And so I said, okay, I moved to Texas, outside of Dallas in Grand Prairie, Texas. I worked in an office out there for a year. So after that year, I moved back. And I said, okay, bank, I'm back. I got a year office experience. Now what's your excuse?
And you got hired.
I got hired. I had 3 offers, and I chose to go to work for this one lady. Best offer I ever took. She did everything she said she was going to do. I kept getting promoted until I became a vice president, and I was community relations manager for Marion, Alachua, and Volusia, Flagler counties.
That was Barnett Bank there.
Yes. And
Way
then,
back there.
Yeah. And it was funny though, Pastor, because, you know, I had to walk a tight line, because if they said a black man told them something or did something, that was me. Out of 407 employees, I was the only black man that worked for Barnett Bank in Volusia County. So I'm like, okay, if they said they talked to a black man, it was me. You know, but I got some brochures and stuff. I won Employee of the Month several different times, and different, you know, received different achievements and stuff. And it was a good experience for me. I brought it on with me when I went to the city, and the Lord blessed me and kept me there. Over years, I've had some pitfalls that would and roadblocks that were put in front of me, and thank God He made a way right through it. The same people that set the block for me, they had to leave, and it opened it up, and I stayed there till I got ready to leave.
You know, it's been a great interview for you to share your story, because some, I hope, young black man listening to your story will know, and I said this in the last interview, it is no secret. What God can do, what He's done for others, He'll do for you. Yeah. Thank you, Deacon Bryant, my friend Deacon here, for sharing with us today, and be blessed. Peace out.